today I will be presenting for the first time in our research network an emerging theme related to the hypothesis of planetary financialization. And in addition to Ludovic Halbert and Ivana Socoloff, who will be sharing this presentation with me, I would also like to thank Félix Addison for his contribution in our discussion. So, our session is divided in two parts. We are going to try this innovation. I hope it's going to work. Firstly, we will present empirical evidence and discuss state-of-the-art issues to provide context for the origins of planetary financialization as a working hypothesis. Secondly, we will engage you in a discussion, posing questions related to methodological concerns, geopolitical issues, and environmental considerations. And to illustrate forms of planetary financialization, we start with some examples in Brazil that connect capital markets, local actors, financial instruments, and social spatial outcomes. The first example relates to the agro-real estate companies. The endowment, sorry for my pronunciation, endowment fund from the University of Harvard has been acquiring land in Brazil, particularly in areas of native Cerrado, the savanna with the greatest biodiversity in the world, and home to indigenous and traditional people and communities. You can see in the map the region. The US fund joined forces with large Brazilian agribusiness companies, and they bought several farms, primarily in the area known as Mato Piba. And as they quickly resold these assets, so-called agricultural real estate companies are less interested in producing agricultural commodities than extracting a rent out of the land and trading the land on international capital markets. Recent inquiries reveal how such a form of speculative accumulation relies on land grabbing, circumvention of legislation, and intensification of labor exploitation and violence against indigenous peoples, quilombolas, and peasants. The second illustration concerns wind energy. In the rural area of Rio Grande do Norte, also in the map, media and scientific reports highlight wind turbines situated just 150 meters from peasant homes. They are operated by multinational corporations, including French firms who work for asset management funds that exploit lax local regulations and contractual loopholes. These financial industrial groups provide minimal compensation to small landowners while capitalizing on a fast-growing and profitable market. Over the past decade, wind power output has multiplied 12-fold in Brazil, now representing 14% of Brazil's electricity production. However, this case study underscores how the environmental agenda can legitimize asymmetrical and exploitative relationships with agricultural activities and farmers who suffer environmental and social nuisance. And the third example refers to family-based agricultural production and the old and internationally recognized Landless Workers Movement, MST, issued agribusiness receivables certificates on the Stock Exchange of São Paulo to finance 7 cooperatives from the production of milk, corn, soybeans, brown sugar, and grape juice, helping 13,000 families. For this, an articulation with the social and environmental impact investment companies was necessary. And I have to confess that these also organize retail investors and I bought some certificates to do a kind of observatory research on this. These vignettes are only 3 of the many entanglements observed between the production of spaces and capital markets in Brazil. Other examples include the assetization of mining, water and transport infrastructure, commercial real estate with REITs, mass housing production, and even in the favelas with a scheme financing housing upgrading. All of them are instances of what we suggest to conceive as planetary financialization, and a hypothesis to which I now turn. And the first issue that we want to discuss with you is the fragmentation of the studies. Because in the wake of the 2007-8 financial crisis, we observe a proliferation of works on financialization. The first one is the critical political economic or heterodox economic analysis, as well as more sociological and critical accountancy perspectives that looked at the extension of financial accumulation in various economic sectors. In addition, a diverse array of studies, more or less directly related to geography, have delved into the interplay between capital markets and the production and reproduction of material spaces, be they built or natural environments. These studies offer striking similarities. For instance, they share a similar interest on how financial actors, instruments, calculations, narratives, and logics influence the reproduction of spaces and communities. Their findings are also convergent. First, for example, on the role played by moralities, values, and affect in the financialization of nature and resistance against it. The second one is the ambivalent roles played by the multi-level state. And the third one, they also highlight the role of financial intermediaries in exacerbating uneven spatial development, social inequalities, power concentration, and environmental injustice. This paves the way for analysis of the contested and contradictory politics of financialization. The expansion of capital markets into diverse geographies relies on coalition building, but also opens opportunities for contestation and resistance. However, the fragmentation of academic production into different studies, each with its own journals and research focuses, for us proves detrimental. Current dialogue is limited and often confined to a small number of prominent scholars. We suggest that a scientific platform is now necessary not only to support an academic network, but also to offer a more integrative conceptual approach. So the concept of planetary financialization hopes to contribute to this academic and theoretical agenda. Planetary financialization seeks to capture how the increasing importance of financial accumulation not only extends in various economic sectors at a global scale, but transforms a whole range of space, communities, and environments. It suggests that capital markets' reach expands across regions of the world beyond core economies in both the global north and south. It also points to how the expansion of financial market actors, capital and techniques, exploits and impacts urban, peri-urban, rural, energetic, logistic, natural areas such as forests or oceans, and more generally, a wide diversity of types of spaces in a given region or country, like we illustrated in the case of Brazil. The concept derives, of course, from 3 perspectives that are partly independent. The first one that is our debate on financialization, especially in terms of the adequate levels of observation and explanation. At a macro political economic level, financialization, as we spoke yesterday and today, can be conceived as a pattern of accumulation in which profit-making occurs increasingly through financial channels rather than through trade and commodity production, in Krippner's definition. And also this may be related to the longue durée accounts of capitalist accumulation cycles. For Brodel and Arrighi, financialization is an autumn made of financial crisis and instability. At a micro level, an alternative view on financialization is to consider it as a specific process of transforming the world, objects, organizations, and the problems we encounter by the introduction of financialized practices, theories, and instruments, included in everyday lives and spatialities, and which might echo works on contemporary assetization. And third, not to mention more intermediary meso-level perspectives to financialization by exploring operations of capital and other entanglements between finance and land or environment. The second perspective is the debate on planetary urbanization. As we know, planetary urbanization has been debated, and critics highlighted a Western-centric, totalizing, economicist, and deterministic approach, resulting in a homogenizing view of contemporary geographies. It's also said to turn a blind eye towards other forms of domination and power asymmetries, for example, racial, gender, and so on. All elements that at first sight could encourage us to throw the baby with the bathwater. Yet, even with these critiques, the concept remains inspiring for several reasons, and now we would like to point these reasons. First, it offers an example of a platform for critically discussing complex and interconnected global urbanization process, say, beyond city limits. And in this slide, it invites us to move beyond spatial dichotomies between urban, rural, and natural environments, for example, and beyond ontological binaries between society and nature, for instance. As such, it offers ways to think about the production of different spaces in relation to one another, despite their specificities and difference. Second, following Lefebvre's points of view, it considers the expansion of capitalist accumulation as a central element to understand the functional, but nevertheless asymmetric interdependencies between cities and other spaces. It does not mean that processes are not variegated and influenced by different factors such as capital, race, gender, and species. And yet, the literature on planetary urbanization did not pay much attention to the profound impact of financialization process on contemporary capitalism and space. And the third debate focuses on capitalism, financialization, and production and reproduction of the environment. There is a growing critical literature that seeks to unmask how the environment is transformed by capital markets as new asset classes: green, sustainable, environmental, blue finance, and many more. As such, the environment offers ways to expand the realm of capital markets, and it also promises to kickstart a new self-proclaimed green cycle of capital accumulation to overcome limits posed by geopolitical tensions, climate change, biodiversity loss, and structural financial instability. It echoes capitalism's complex relationship to the environment and nature. On the one hand, based on Marx's notion of the metabolic rift, capital adds to the exploitation of human labor the robbery of the free gifts of nature, For instance, the environment is conceived and constructed as a natural resource ready to be exploited. And on the other hand, capitalism is more generally part of an ecological regime. Capitalism does not act upon nature so much as develop through nature-society relations, as Moore poses. The environment here being as a product and engine of capitalist process and evolutions. This invite not to limit the environment of capital markets to natural spaces, like the oceans, the forests, the sun, etc., but also to integrate the ecological dimension of diverse types of space, like environmental finance does when it seeks to transform commercial real estate buildings into green assets by ways of displaying green labels. Yet, we need to go a step further by considering the diversity of environments and spaces and of the ecological relationships between and within and between them. In a Lefebvrean perspective, planetary financialization does invite us to more generally question the environment in all its forms, be it built or unbuilt, and whatever there is along this gradient between built and unbuilt, and to consider how they work as spatial or environmental fixes, as Harvey posed in the 80s and Stephen Umar in the 2018, whereby nature and resource-based production and the built environment alike serve as new circuits for capital to help resolve global capitalism's multiple crises. So, with this in mind, we suggest at this stage to consider planetary financialization as a working hypothesis, with all its fragilities and uncertainties, whose first merit is to provide a common ground and an integrative conceptual platform for transcending current scholarly fragmentation and fostering interdisciplinary dialogue. This concept for us is full of promises. It helps us understand how finance can both homogenize and destabilize various sectors, spaces, and communities. This expansion, like a frontier, is not completely achieved or uncontested. It also shows us that financialization of spaces is a variegated process, not only because of the uneven nature of capitalist development, but also because of the influence of different political and institutional frameworks and regulations at different levels. Finally, it also allows us to see financialization as a dialectical process, where its growth creates conditions that can be used to contest it. However, the planetary financialization faces numerous challenges. It means working towards a refined definition and situate it at the conjuncture of multiple theoretical traditions, Marxist, feminist, political ecology, and others, something that has not been done so far. It also implies developing adequate methodologies for its study. So it's necessary to test its heuristics and to map its limits. How does it help us to get insight into the current phase of capitalist financialization in the context of systemic, social, geopolitical, and environmental crises? All elements to which we propose to orient our general discussion from now on. And now, I would like to open the discussion and invite Ludovic to start the first round of questions and try if it's going to work. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so there is no manual to this because it's the first time we are doing these round tables and emergent discussions. So what we've tried to do is to get a series of themes to get the discussion rolling. We have identified 3 themes, and I will start with asking a couple of methodological questions, And if you feel it's not working, then we can try and invent another way of organizing this discussion. It's not a problem. We're really open to this. So yeah, if we're thinking of planetary financialization as Lucia just exposed how we feel about this concept, one issue is that of it's the methodologies, and with it there are also theoretical questions that go along with it. So maybe 4 questions to get you thinking. The first is the issue of inheritance, because obviously as geographers, planetary financialization rings a bell with planetary urbanization. And as Lucia mentioned, it has been a criticized concept, that of planetary urbanization. And maybe, I don't know, the burden is too heavy to be carried and keep with that planetary financialization formulation. So that's open, the issue of inheritance and relationship with planetary urbanization. Second aspect is the issue of levels of analysis, and with them, the underlying question is that of explanations. Because with the level of analysis, we do not carry the same understanding of the world, really. So we have works at micro level, which are actor-centric practices. Rachel, you gave us something really interesting by looking at knowledge technologies this morning. I think it's more kind of micro level kind of starting point. Then you have the macro-political. I mean, I'm not going over what Lucia said. So there are different levels of analysis. So what do we do with them? Is it still something that we need to debate together and that can help us understanding planetary financialization? Or is it something that is really a discussion from the past that we had some time back in our network? More precisely, there is this issue of assetization versus financialization, because we could say that financialization is more on the macro-political type of analysis, while assetization would be more on the micro-meso level, a way of operationalizing as well financialization. So the issue of the levels of observations, and then obviously the issue of scales, because planetary does help us to bring space back into financialization, back into the equation, of course. But this is at the cost of many more questions. So let me just open a couple of them. What does planetary mean? Is it in terms of the spatial reach? Planetary is when a process is all over the planet or in a number of different regions and continents. Is it an issue of dynamics? Something that increases its spatial reach, or that can also be retracted when contested. And of course, there's the issue of its density. As we see in Brazil, when a lot of different types of spaces are inserted into capital markets, then are we talking about planetary financialization, even if it's just in one country? And there would be another dimension to this. It's planetary financialization could be understood in a much more precise way, or focused way. Planetary financialization, could refer to the process where capital markets try to tackle planetary stakes, planetary issues like global warming, for instance. So that's another way of questioning what is planetary about planetary financialization. We could think also of how this concept can combine the topographies of material spaces that are caught up into the topologies and the relationality of capital markets. Or to quote it, and I would like to cite McCann, Royal and Ward, to combine global relationality and territorial embeddedness. And actually, I thought maybe we could see it the other way, to combine global embeddedness and territorial relationality. So I'm just trying to make things more complicated so we look clever in a way. Now, more seriously, in the last part is what are the analytical concepts we can use to look and understand, observe and explain this planetary financialization process? We have a lot of vocabulary at hand at the moment now. We have financial chains, financial circuits, financial infrastructure that we use in our network. How are they helpful, and are they actually helpful in grasping planetary financialization? And if we are serious about the use of the term financial infrastructure, should we understand planetary financialization as an infrastructure that tends to expand, and thus we would have to look at maybe the competition of capital markets with other financial infrastructures? So there is an inside of planetary financialization and an outside, and so the thinking is more about the process of frontier making and shifting by capital markets. There we go. So if you want to pick up the ball where we just dropped it, please feel free. We don't know how to organize this conversation really. Thank you. So I don't know, maybe, and actually we don't need, it would be better if we could make a circle, of course, because it's going to be a conversation, but there is a problem with the materiality of this world.
Yes. I'm trying to do some question. Very intrigued proposition, and I think that's open space for like a huge agenda of work. But maybe I will come back to some things that Lucia said that make me think, because Lucia cite MST, that is without land movement in Brazil, and the agribusiness that historically are the great rivals in the struggle for land in the country, and put them, I'm doing some simplification, but put them in the same process, or at least in the kind of the standards of homogenization. So my question is, because I'm not judging, and I think this moral judgment in the discussion of financialization is really strong, but for me there is a difference that's maybe is important to take in account. That in the case of MST, for instance, they are using this financial instrument as a way to finance production, and in the agribusiness, they are this connection with sophisticated institutional investors are related with the production of the land as an asset itself. So the way that space and the land relations enter in these two processes are completely different. Saying that, I'm questioning if we were talking, when we say planetary financialization, we intend to discuss the financialization of all sectors of the economy, of all industry, or we are focused, and maybe planetary urbanization, the space dimension are not so clear, or we are focused in this process where land is space, and when I say land, I'm saying more broader sense, are being mobilized to be part of this huge process of accumulation. So I start to MST to put, where's the place of space in your theorization or in this perspective? Because it seems that for us here, it's really important to take account the space, because maybe economists are not so concerned about that. So it's thank you.
Thank you for these very challenging questions and ambitious proposal to create this kind of global platform where these issues can be discussed. And again, I'm very grateful that I can be here. I participated on some conferences regarding finance and space. They were very much Eurocentric, so here I really feel another air. Okay, so I was thinking to focus on this dilemma if the term planetary should be or could be used, having in our mind that the planetary urbanization perspective was so much criticized. I would say yes, so I would use the term, maybe especially because there is already such a rich debate around planetary urbanization. So it's not only the mainstream theory, but all the critical approaches that we can learn from and integrate the whole luggage of this theoretical debate into this new proposal. I was thinking to, and personally, since I'm a Marxist theorist, I like very much the planetary urbanization framework because it's a great way in which critical urban studies brought Marxist perspective into analyzing urbanization, space, housing, real estate development. So this is another reason that I love this perspective. I would maybe think to combine it more explicitly with word system theory. So to make use of the potential of core, periphery, semi-periphery distinctions and uneven development, geographical development across continents, countries, regions, cities, within cities, etc. Because in this way, I guess it's a bit easier analytically to go beyond the criticism against planetary urbanization as a universalist frame. So to show how these processes happen according to the place and role that different spaces play in the global accumulation process. What else? Maybe this is a more political argument, continuing arguments to use the planetary financialization frame. Planetary, in my mind, would suggest that we are in a phase in which capitalism really became global, so there is no non-capitalist space in the world order. So what can we expect is that different capitalist powers, including financial actors, compete among each other for redistributing resources and using space. So it's not anymore the colonizing non-capitalist world, but another phase, imperialist phase maybe. Another additional matter, but this is something extra maybe compared to what we discussed until now, but personally I'm very much eager to start thinking about this, maybe a new research, I don't know. The connection between militarization and real estate development and financialization. So because, this is again something which marks very much our contemporary world capitalist system, so maybe we can add that too.
Thank you, everyone. This was really exciting to hear and lots of really provocative questions to think about. I want to build on Bia's comment. Bia raised the issue with reference to the MST example, of these instruments being put to different uses. But I also think there is a question of process being qualitatively different, that thinking about it as planetary urbanization and equalizing all those experiences within that concept that might miss out on. So to illustrate this, for the project that we're doing on impact investing in Brazil, we interviewed Gaia, which is the securitizer behind that instrument. And one of the things that was really interesting is that there was actually a lot of resistance from the financial industry to the CRA. Like they didn't see that as kind of, something that should exist. So it's not the same as the agribusiness industry, going out and seeking, to use green bonds to, not just turn land into an asset, but to also comply with ESG criteria and so on and so forth. So I'm kind of curious, like, how do you, take into account, those qualitative differesorts in process and what's actually happening between the negotiations amongst the different actors, without just resorting to the notion of variegation that I don't think actually helps us think about this, about difference in a concrete way. So that's one point. And then the other question I had that maybe, is worth adding to the list that you have is like, what do we do with this concept politically? Like, what does it help us do in terms of concrete struggles that the concepts that we already have don't help us do? Thank you.
Thank you. This is really interesting. And I agree with the previous two comments about geopolitics. Like, one thing I was thinking as you were talking is like to make sure we keep the ideological power of finance and how there's this like growing acceptance of finance as this neutral medium through which rational decisions can be made. And it's almost as if like governments are more and more capitulating to the idea you must have like these arrangements to support financialization, and that if you don't, you're going to be left behind. And I think on the other side of things, geopolitics is really important. Like, I'm thinking about Ilya Salami's work. I don't know if anyone's familiar about how all of a sudden there are governments trying to put limits on who the investors are. And so I think that's another really important like limit to this as well. So I agree with the world systems theory, I think. And I also was thinking about the first point of the issue of inheritance. And I think there are lots of legitimate reasons to sort of like, I don't know, worry about how the word planetary has been interpreted in ways that have led to a lot of critique of that theory. But I also think we could think about it as inheriting a lot of things from the critiques that have been made. So I think one of the most important ones has been the sort of where do we start? So like the ordinary cities literature and all this sort of post-colonial literature has been critiquing like always starting, like in London or in New York, which I think we could also incorporate here and think, okay, well, are we starting with the financial centers? Are we starting with the mega projects, even if they are occurring in the global south? Or are we starting with, experiences of the impacts of financialization? And so that where to begin, how do we know it when we see it question, I think could be a useful way of kind of flipping this issue of inheritance into something productive.
Thank you for the. I think all of the salon need this presentation. It was very thought-provoking for me. I don't have any question, but maybe some theoretical comments. For the 2 days in analysis, case studies were very interesting, but I always ask myself, I did not ask the presenters, where's the state? Where is the state in this analysis? I mean, because we are analyzing the capitalist system. Okay, we don't recommend socialism or any other system, but we are political economists and we are analyzing capitalist system. And market, it doesn't exist by itself. The state is a very important actor. And so maybe Marxist state theory helps us to understand the relations between state capital. because it's a story of class war. On the other side, I'm from Turkey, and Turkish case is very similar with Latin America cases. When I'm listening yesterday, Beatrice, I'm like listening Istanbul, story of Istanbul, mega projects in Istanbul. So for Planetary financialization story, it's definitely we need to analyze different global South cases, so that literature will enrich. On the other side, if I'm told to go on state, state is not neutral actor in our analysis. I mean, state and the other theoretical problem. The thing which is political and the thing which is economic, it's always separated in our analysis, but it's the same thing in capitalism. It's one point. And what else I can say? Also, I asked this question to myself. Okay, we are urban political economists. We are more or less critical, and what this academic knowledge serves for who? I mean, what can we relate to academy and urban social movements? How can we produce our information to them? Okay, we make an very nice academic discussions between each other, but how do we narrate our story? Because we are analyzing, it's a kind of process of déchiffrer, I mean, and we are analyzing capitalist system. So it's a commodification. We should start there. That's all. My thoughts are very, disorganized. Thank you.
Hi. Okay, I guess my question builds on Emily's question about. I mean, I wonder how you see the in the idea of planetary financialization. How do you see the diffusion of financialization as a global process, and how do you engage with the literature of, for example, subordinate financialization? As they see, like, for example, financialization as a process that gets disseminated through monetary channels and the asymmetries of power in the international monetary system, but also it could be like geopolitics, as Emily mentioned, as one of the channels through which financialization flows from some centers to peripheries, or else you see the relationship between center and periphery in a different way to avoid the trap of Eurocentric notions of processes disseminated from there to the periphery. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yes, so we have more challenging questions to you. For us to reflect, these are open questions actually, so we wanted to open this panel to think collectively and try to bring some collective ideas. So, as you might have seen, last week's issue of The Economist introduced a special report that argued that finance is deglobalizing, as an narrow array of forces have combined to reduce the system dependence on Western capital, institutions, and payment networks, and on American in particular. a fragmented financial system through financial sanctions, protectionism, and geopolitical realignment of capital flows coexist with a growing dollar hegemony over global finance. If we remember the Brodel-Arrighi-Longue-Durée perspective, that stated that financialization characterizes hegemonic transitions, the autumn of US New York secular cycle of industrial accumulation. So what do we think about? How are current geopolitical transformations, such as global production chains being diverted to friendly territories, Russia-China financial and commercial agreements, a form of new Cold War as the IMF defined it last year, and or the globalization of finance as the economist named it. How are these current geopolitical transformations likely to affect the reach of planetary financialization processes? And the other question is, in this deglobalization of finance, it might be moving us toward a regionalization of finance, investment payments, but is it changing of actor, instruments, and narrative of current financialization and production of space? These are, again, open questions, and we want to hear your impressions of this. Some of us already was said about this.
Maybe I should present the third one and then we open? No?
Does anyone have a reaction? No. Rachel? I see. Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, I will perhaps not really elaborate on that, but perhaps on the discussion. In my opinion, there is an interesting point, a parallel, which is to be done between Saskia Sassen's vision. She was speaking about the global city. And at the beginning of the 90s, she was saying, okay, we have one single city which is made of London, Tokyo, and New York, okay? Which means that at that time, the integration, let's say the socialization of production forces, as Marx would say, okay? That there is the constitutions of a kind of organization which is above the traditional geographies of cities, okay? And these distant interactions become more crucial than the proximity of the city with, for example, the hinterland. And for me, this question of financialization, planetary financialization, could be perhaps be understood as a new step in the constitution of this huge economic organization, which would be made of the predominance of these network of cities. Because we do no longer have only financial interactions, but what has increased a lot, we do not have only, of course, the circulation of commodities, but we also have, and this is very important, a huge increase in the mobility of people. First, as we are having here a workshop, but we have one every 2 years, which seems totally normal. Sorry, it's not. It's the first time in history that it can be done so easily. And of course, another integration which is very, very, very important, which is all this symbolic scene, which is integrated through internet. And I think it's very important. I mean, this conference here, we are concretely in this room, but there are plenty of things on internet happening about it, okay? Including posts, including perhaps direct videos and all that. And this leads us to have an access to global thinking, for instance, from any place in the world. And this is, of course, perhaps a traditional understanding of all this, but I think it's nevertheless important.
So I will be much shorter now than I was. This issue of geopolitical transformations, I could think to link to how the current polycrisis, global polycrisis, puts an end on the neoliberal stage of capitalism as we knew it since the 1970s. So maybe questioning what kind of phase are we entering, which is reflected in these geopolitical transformations, new Cold War and new proxy wars and new ways to remake the global order between capitalist powers. So yeah, I would add that. And then again, the issue of militarization, maybe in the form of how the military-industrial complex is affected by financialization and becomes a new process by which spatial fixing is happening. So it seems that the end of old neoliberal capitalism means that spatial fixing cannot happen anymore by peaceful means, so capitalism needs wars, and the military-industrial complex actually creates new opportunities for new investments during the war and in the post-war reconstruction as well, including housing and other other real estate sectors.
I will be very brief, but joining the different remark about the issue of geopolitics, that of the movement of people, that about our role as researcher, and about the political meaning of this concept. I think that we can also think about the planetarization of the study of financialization and of the analysis and critique of this process. So maybe it's an interesting dimension to integrate into the geopolitics, which is not only about states, but also about social movements and academic knowledge, maybe.
When Eniko is talking, I remember that, and we did not talk about, if we are talking about global problems, like environmental issues, but we did not talk about authoritarianism, rising nationalism, right politics. And what's the connection between financialization and authoritarianism? Because in Turkish case, construction sector is the finance mechanism of new regime. So maybe in other cases, in India or in Brazil, thankfully yours is very small, but in Turkey, okay, we are suffering for years. Yeah. So what's the relation between rising authoritarianism, the other authoritarian regimes, and financialization? Thank you.
Sorry. Just to join the conversation. Just thinking, it's going to be very brief, but there may be a de-globalization of finance, which may be happening, but I'm not so sure that it means that we have a definancialization of the world anyway. So, well, voilà, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
No, we have the last block of issue, that is the relation between financialization and environment, and how can we consider the production of space, in French, le vivant et non vivant. The first question is, how does separating environmental, green, or blue finance from broader financialization process impact finance as an industry, and also our ability as researchers to dissect these attempts at internalizing the green critique by today's capitalism? Is this separation a barrier for scholars to gain a comprehensive understanding of the influence of capital markets on the diversity of environments, including various types of spaces and the ecological relationships within and between them? I've already said this in the introduction. The second one is, could we say that planetary financialization echoes capitalism's complex relationship to the environment, nature, already identified in the notion of metabolic rift, or in the notion of ecological regime, and also in the world system, as you mentioned also? And in the third one, in a Lefebvrean perspective, does it result that planetary financialization invite us to more generally question the environment in all its forms, be it built or unbuilt, considering that both serve as an environmental fix or a spatial fix? Or are there specificities, for instance, moral, that prevent us thinking together, human and no humans, living and no living? For example, is this the same to financialize a concrete building or a farmland, the wind or an animal? This is our last question for you. And we don't have answers for the moment. We would like also, we are here to listen. And we have more 2 days of workshop on Monday and on Tuesday to debate this. But it's, again, open related to this last block of questions. Felix?
Also, thank you all very much for the discussions and presentations. I was thinking just to maybe again complicate the story, and also remembering Rachel's questions from yesterday about private interests, public interests, and I'm thinking about EU transformations. So the green transition in the EU. Which offers funding for different greening projects and renovations, and it's a lot of money, but at the same time this comes with requirements for structural reforms that show more discrete processes of financialization. And I'm thinking that maybe the planetary financialization frame, it can be an invitation to research into more discrete forms of financialization, of advancement of financial logics and actors. And in the example of the EU green transition, this comes with transformation of pensions, labor legislation transformations that will push households into more credit. So these are more discrete forms, or maybe indirect processes that lead to financialization. And also linked to that, there is new European legislation forbidding energy and utility companies to cut off households from receiving utilities. This sounds like a public interest policy, but in fact what it does is that a lot of households are indebted with utility bills, and this is actually the main form of indebtedness, and not credit and not mortgages, but utility bills. And utility companies and energy companies are selling these debt and arrears on utility bills. They are being sold to non-bank financial institutions. So this is another more discrete process of financialization that comes with the green transition, or talks about public interests. And then also complicating the story of resistance. that we also have cases of non-progressive resistance to financialization, and our colleagues from Hungary have documented this. Like in Hungary, the biggest social movement in the last 20 years was against foreclosures and against repossessions, and it was really a non-progressive movement. So I think we should somehow include looking at or bridging towards this as well. So thank you very much.
Okay, well, I was just sort of, to follow up on that, I was thinking that a lot of the presentations yesterday, I think very usefully complicated the public-private finance binary. And then combining that with the point you just made about questioning what is done in the name of the public interest, which I think the critiques of like green finance have done very usefully. That might be another way of intervening, is to, I mean, I've made this critique, so I'm just going to echo it again, but there's been so much work on like private finance and the way it sort of colonizes the world. But I think a little more nuanced attention to what this public-private binary kind of forecloses analytically could be really helpful as we discuss this question in particular.
Yeah, I would like to say that with the environmental problematics comes two great opportunities for the planetary financialization agenda. The first one, I think, is radical transdisciplinarity. I mean, for considering the environmental effects as political economists or human geographers, we are, I think, a bit limited. So we need biologists, scientists working seriously on climate change, and so on and so forth. I mean, that if you really want make the point about the detrimental environmental effects of financialization and its planetary scale, you need to consider these effects from their perspective, but I also think that they need us in order to give a more more explanation in the effect that they are analyzing. The other opportunity, I think, is, and coming back to the first and second topics, is to discuss geopolitical and post-colonial or new colonial relationships through environmental and environmental consideration and resources transfer, since most extractive industries are located in the global south and they are mostly used for the industry and the consumption in the European countries and North American countries, inclusively for the ecological transition in these northern countries. So I think, yes, that maybe there is an opportunity for thinking of, I mean, linking the planetary financialization reflection with that of post-colonial thinking or decolonial thinking. Thank you.
Yes, all this makes me think to a traditional question of political economy. I mean, when we speak about financialization, we of course speak about the financialization of capital, okay? And the question is always, is nature a capital or is it not, okay? And we are back to the discussion between the classics and the neoclassics. For the classics, there are the three famous factors of production: capital, labor, and land, okay, and the nature. And in the 40s, 50s, we had the neoclassic who said, okay, nature is and space is no longer a limiting factor, because we have the car, we have cities that can be very big, we have fertilizers, so we don't need a surface to have a certain quantity of food. So they took away the land as a production factor. And the interesting point in this discussion here is that we precisely have probably today to reintroduce the land and the earth as production factor. I mean, a specific production factor. And there is a big debate about how different is nature, let's say, from capital. And nature is not produced. Capital is produced. I mean, real estate is built. Machines are produced, and so on and so forth. But space is not. Nature is not, and so on and so forth. And there are many differences like that that could be put into the discussion. And it's probably here that we have something to think about in order to articulate those elements like environment and financialization.
So I've just observed that it's only mostly senior researchers who got the chance to express themselves. So if PhD students or early career researchers wants to contribute to the discussion, because you're the only one who will have a fresh new idea. So please go on and don't hesitate to speak up. Huh? Because these are collective questions, I think that we need to pick up and develop over the weekend, next week, and maybe over a few years, if that works out well. What do? We think it's over, so we'd like to thank you very much. I'm not sure we have a new manual to organize these conversations, but I think it worked quite well. Please say yes. And thanks a lot for your participation. Do you want to say anything else? Oh, we're good? So it's time to go for some food, I suppose, or a break at least. Okay, thank you.